Needing some house and home design inspiration? Well, you'll get it from today's color code of HC169. We got the code, now let's get to cracking. If you've been keeping up with the current interior design trends, you may have seen a subtle departure from the color gray. But I really wanted to take a look at today's color, Coventry gray, because I feel like it offers something more than a lot of the warmer off-white grays that have been very popular the last couple years. This is James from thepaintpeople.com, and welcome to Color Code, where we crack the code on color selection. By the end of this video, you'll be equipped with all the necessary information you need about Coventry gray, its undertones, its LRV, and you'll learn how to use it, where to use it, and what to use it with. Grays have been mega popular in recent years, mainly because of their kind of futuristic and understated appearance. But to be fair, as boring as gray can sometimes seem conceptually, there really is quite a bit of variety within the gray color palette, not only when it comes to undertones, but also the level of depth as well. Coventry Gray by Benjamin Moore is a mid-tone gray with an LRV of 48.35. And you might be asking, where does it sit on the temperature chart for the neutral colors out there? Well, it really depends on who you ask and under what lighting. There are other grays that are so clearly beige infused and therefore warm, and while Coventry Gray is technically on the cooler side ever so slightly, when you look at the color on its own against a white background, it doesn't look overly green or blue, which happens to be this color's undertones. In a lot of cases, Coventry Gray has the illusion of looking quite blue, and that's because of northern exposures or inconsistently lit spaces. But with neutral lighting, or pure white light, you start to see that it is fairly down the middle as a gray. This is a color that is pretty important to test in whatever space you're using it in, and it's because it's right on that cusp, which can push it one way or another. If you had a saturated blue color, it's most likely going to look blue whether it's in a north-facing or south-facing room. But these sort of kind of ambiguous neutral grays can play tricks with your eyes more often than other colors. I recommend testing all colors, but these types of grays especially. So a little bit later, I'll talk to you about mighty boards, which are a mighty fine way to test colors effectively. To some people, this tone of gray will seem a bit too cool, but to others, this could be the perfect middle ground gray. If you're a fan of colors like Stonington gray, then coincidentally enough, Coventry Gray is a close neighbor to that color, but obviously the darker variation. As a whole, Coventry Gray favors sophistication and elegance over a homey, cozy feeling of a warmer counterpart. Not to say that this color will make you feel unwelcome in your own home, but there's definite characteristics that come with a cooler gray over our old friend grayish. Where should you use it? 48 LRV isn't crazy dark of a light reflectance value, which makes sense considering it's a mid-tone color. I also see many people using midtones throughout their home. The one word of caution I would provide to you is, from a versatility standpoint, I find that cooler grays aren't always as cooperative as warmer ones when you get to a certain level of depth. Midtones in general are usually a fantastic choice in areas that get great light because it'll help accentuate the color rather than have it get lost or washed out. This is a color that is easily recognizable as one because of its distinguished look and its amount of colorant. At the end of the day, it's still gray, so there's really no room where I would say, absolutely not, steer clear of Coventry Gray. But what I find it comes down to, like most color-related things, is personal preference. You have to at least be open to a cooler looking gray, much like brushed metals, stainless steel, and other more contemporary fixtures you might have. This color will give your space a distinct look, and it's probably not my first choice for traditional design styles. I could see it working in a transitional decor, but neutrals this cool tend to be most common in your more contemporary schemes, for the most part. I want to stress that this is a to each their own scenario, as I truly believe that you can make practically any color work in any circumstance as long as it's used appropriately. A surefire way to get good use of Coventry Gray is to use it as an alternative to white on your kitchen cabinets. Gray seems to be the new white in kitchens, so you could entertain that idea. Maybe not if you're just trying to be on trend, because trends are temporary, and having to repaint your kitchen would just be tedious. What's a good trim color for it? Well, I'll start by saying that Coventry Gray itself could be a fantastic trim color, mainly because of its undertones. That little blue skew it can sometimes have is more apparent on big surfaces like walls, but if you use it on baseboards and frames, it's not nearly as visible. One of the simplest ways to use Coventry Gray on your trim is to incorporate its lighter color swatch sibling in Wickham Gray on the walls. These two work because you still have that one color in between in Stonington Gray, so there's enough difference in depth between your woodwork and your walls, and it just provides an interesting alternative to your classic pure white trim. If you wanted white trim, I am a fan of Distant Gray, and it's because it really doesn't contain much warmth at all. It's just a very crisp, mega light gray that will help pronounce the undertones in Coventry Gray just enough. What colors should you pair it with? Well, you might be tempted to double down on the grayscale theme, but I would encourage you to explore some warmer options that can change up the space quite a bit. Now, even though Coventry Gray is a bit dark, my first recommendation would be an even darker color in Cushing Green. This is a beautiful, soft, dark green tone that is rich without being in your face. The bit of gray within it tones down the saturation ever so slightly, where it's still quite a deep form of hunter green, but personally, I love its interaction with Coventry Gray. If I were to pick one lighter neutral color to pair here, especially if you're considering that green color as well, one to tie the three together would be Gray Owl, which is a fantastic lighter neutral color that works in several different circumstances. It's not the warmest light gray out there, but it introduces more than enough to lighten the space it's used in. So those three alone could create a nice little color palette that is still fairly modern, but not brutally cold and industrial looking. Can you compare it to other colors? There are some similar colors in the Benjamin Moore palette, and the first one being Smoke Embers 1466. This one is technically a bit lighter of a color, but the main difference I find is the added red colorant in it, which doesn't necessarily warm the color up too much, but it does give it more of a taupe feel and an ever so slight purple undertone that comes through more often than not. For a color that is more heavy-handed with its blue undertone, again, another 50 plus LRV color, but Winter Solstice, in some cases, might even appear a tad darker because of its amped up blue undertone. If that's what you're specifically going for, then it might be a better choice for you. If you're unsure of whether or not you want a bit more red or a bit more yellow, the best option is to test several colors before you commit to painting the room. And probably the best way to do it, in my opinion, is using a paintable board like Mighty Boards, which give you a ton of surface area to work with. And there's the fact that you can move it around the room and see the color under different lighting conditions throughout the day. These things in particular are flexible, but also do a great job at lying flat, so you get the right representation of whichever color you're testing. I'll be sure to leave a link below for more information if you need some paint testing supplies. Who is this color for? This is going to be a color code first, because I'm going to attempt to assess the ideal type of person or situation where this color would be a home run. If you're looking for a mid-tone gray that finds a pretty serviceable balance between a soothing coolness without feeling ice cold, and you purposely are trying to avoid those clearly gray beige colors, then give Coventry Gray a try. If you could do me a huge favor, it's actually not that huge, but it's a huge deal for me, if you smack that like button on your way out. That's it for this one. See you on the next one.